This is someone who knew exactly what they were doing, as someone who has a long history in shooting. This wasn't an amateur.
This assassination of Charlie Kirk is indicative of a professional hit.
It looks like a professional hit job from quite a ways away.
For the next week, an opposing person from the left gets assassinated. You have to know this is happening from an outside source, a different country that wants to see America have a civil war.
Doesn't this look like somebody who knew how to kill?
Very well planned, very well orchestrated plot.
So we have multiple voices in the news saying that this was not an amateur, multiple former FBI agents, law enforcement experts saying that this assassination has all the hallmarks of a professional hit job.
I think this assassination, different than the assassinated attempt back in Butler, Pennsylvania, was a very well planned, very well orchestrated plot that was put in motion days before, and this individual had a plan of escape to elude detection of being out up on a rooftop and also being able to evade and elude law enforcement after that shot was taken. When you take a look at what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, Crooks came onto the venue, he left the venue, he came back, he was questioned. I mean, it was really an amateur scenario. This assassination of Charlie Kirk, to me, is indicative of a professional hit, and I'm not so sure that we are going to quickly be able to apprehend this individual without some luck, hopefully.
When you say professional hit, what do you mean by that exactly? Do you mean one shot, one kill, escape already planned and at large? It looks clean, yes, but could this be done by anybody with any sort of basic training?
Well, when you take a look at the video and you take a look at the venue and the spectators and how close they are to Charlie Kirk, and then you have that kind of like umbrella over him, that kind of tent, you have to know that this shooter had to be perched in a position with respect to being able to lay his sights perfectly, basically a headshot. And the shot that was taken to immediately incapacitate Charlie Kirk. And so this was not some amateur who just, got up on a rooftop because it was, what I consider spontaneous combustion. He got up this morning and decided he was going to do something crazy. This seems the earmark of a professional that got up onto this rooftop well in advance of the venue being occupied by the spectators. He was clearly undetected. There was no indication that anybody saw him up on this rooftop. Obviously, after that one single shot was taken, he was able to basically very quietly and systematically elude any further detection and escape. There's been no indication that there's been a vehicle identified or any mode of how he actually escaped the venue. And so to me, this is someone who had some experience, some level of sophistication to have mapped out exactly how this was going to go down.
So I want to be clear, I was also one of these people who immediately just thought that this was some kind of left-wing violence, that there was someone with a grudge against Charlie Kirk, that it was potentially an amateur of some sort, but a lot of voices out there are thinking this is a professional hit job. I'll get into the man who was taken into custody and then released in a second, but here's another voice in the media saying that it was a professional hit job and why.
It looks like a professional hit job from quite a ways away. Long shot, probably high-powered rifle, able to pierce the arteries in the neck. So someone who's professional, it appears. That's what the FBI's early assessment is. We're a long way from knowing a lot.
Ho. You're using a term. You're saying you use the word professional. What do you mean by that?
Someone who knew how to handle a gun. It wasn't someone that just got a spur-of-the-moment idea and was going to go shoot Charlie. It looks like it's from a longer distance, maybe from a building or window away. We're still learning stuff, and in the fog of war, it takes some time. So we're going to have to sort this out. But the early assessment of law enforcement officials I talked to is that this looked like somebody who knew how to kill and knew how to handle a gun and knew how to set up in a way that they could assassinate someone and then possibly get away, which is what they initially have done. They don't have anyone in custody yet. So they don't believe the shooter was in the crowd. The angle of shot suggested it was probably an elevated location, which would have to be a little bit further off, much like what we saw with President Trump's attempted assassination in Butler.
leads you to believe it's just not some random, at the last minute, emotional, like some of these school shootings we've seen or some of these other shootings we've seen? That it is something, looks like somebody that really knew their way around weapons and the way around getting a shot off and getting away, John Solomon?
There is some belief that this was intentional and thought out, perhaps a little bit. Some of the early assessments of the shot, the way where it landed, where it came from, suggests that there's some intentionality and maybe some marksman expertise in this.
Getting right up.
Yeah. You think he'd already be in place?
You would think that. So there's somebody on the roof right there? Just saying?
Huh.
He just ran from over, where's my finger? Well, from over there, ran in, and now he's right there. Just saying.
Clip also seems to show someone on the roof.
You've got an individual who went to a rooftop dressed in dark clothing, found a sniper's perch, and made a very long shot, a single shot that resulted in this assassination. Likes to be in control. The offender characteristics of the assassin sniper are something that's been studied very closely, especially by the Secret Service. And it's someone who's methodical and patient, self-reliant. In other words, Caitlin, this is the kind of person who would have planned to get in silently, try to be invisible, take this shot, accomplish the mission, take the gun with them, and leave little evidence behind, which is why I think they're having a very difficult time getting started on this. This is someone who was a planner.
And John, also what stood out to me from what we heard from officials earlier was they said it was a single shot that was fired. It wasn't multiple shots in Charlie Kirk's direction. They said it was about 200 yards away from where he was sitting under that tent. What does that tell you about the person's familiarity with firearms?
That tells you that the person is not new to shooting, that they understood exactly what type of long rifle to bring, what kind of optics in terms of scopes and sights to have on that, what the windage was that might affect a shot from that distance. This is someone who knew exactly what they were doing and is probably known to others, and this may be working to the advantage of law enforcement, as someone who has a long history in shooting. This wasn't an amateur.
So initially, we had learned that the suspect who was taken into custody, according to FBI Director Kash Patel, was a man named Zachary Ahmed Qureshi from Salt Lake City, Utah. He's an Arabic linguist for the Mormon Church, the Church of Latter-day Saints, and also worked for a venture capital firm, as well as interning for the conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation. Now, we since have learned that this man was released after being interrogated by the FBI, so he is no longer the person of interest. But as you heard from CNN, they have another suspect who is not currently in custody that they are keeping their tabs on. And these are the two tweets put out by Kash Patel earlier. He said, "The subject for the horrific shooting today that took the life of Charlie Kirk is now in custody. This gave everyone a huge sense of relief. We'd thought that the person was caught pretty much the same day that the event took place." However, Kash Patel then followed up that tweet basically an hour later saying the subject in custody has been released after an interrogation by law enforcement. Multiple voices on X, multiple conservative voices also think that it's a skilled shooter and a professional hit. Roger Stone says he's studied the Kennedy assassination at length and he believes that it was a professional hit. People like Laura Loomer also think this. According to investigative journalist John Solomon, the FBI currently has a few hot leads and then some foreign intelligence actually related to the shooter in the Charlie Kirk case.
We don't have a shooter tonight. We have a couple leads, a couple people that were released that probably aren't the shooter. There's a couple hot leads. There's a little bit of foreign intelligence. And I think over the next couple of days, we will learn a lot more. And hopefully we will bring to justice the evil person who did what they did to Charlie today.
And Matthew Dowd, an MSNBC analyst, disgraced himself today, got himself fired after saying horrendous things about Charlie Kirk before Kirk was even pronounced deceased. He was fired for these comments in particular.
But following up with what was just said, he's been one of the most divisive, especially divisive younger figures in this, who is constantly sort of pushing this sort of hate speech or sort of aimed at certain groups. And I always go back to hateful thoughts lead to hateful words, which then lead to hateful actions.
So you had Matthew Dowd there basically saying that because Charlie Kirk is a purveyor of hate speech, that he deserved to be murdered. The MSNBC president Rebecca Cutler said, quote, "During our breaking news coverage of the shooting of Charlie Kirk, Matthew Dowd made comments that were inappropriate, insensitive, and unacceptable. We apologize for his statements, as has he. There is no place for violence in America, political or otherwise." So this was before they actually fired him. I guess the heat had gotten so hot that they had to actually straight up can the guy. Good riddance. Unfortunately, that was not the only time that MSNBC erred in their coverage of this horrifying event today. At one point, one of their analysts actually suggested that the sniper, that the potentially professional sniper, the alleged professional assassin, was a gun nut Trump supporter shooting off his gun in support of Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, and again, to emphasize what you just emphasized, we don't know any of the full details of this. We don't know if this was a supporter shooting their gun off in celebration, or so we have no idea about.
You also saw Katie Tur of MSNBC basically saying that the horrifying assassination, the barbaric, bloody, horrifying assassination of Charlie Kirk is only bad because it will give Trump license to do worse things.
After one of the Doge employees was allegedly attacked in Washington, D.C., that's what Donald Trump used as justification to send in federal troops into Washington, D.C. to get things under control. The carjacking situation, he used that. I know it's hard to predict the future, Mark, but you can imagine the administration using this as a justification for something.
I must admit, I'm at a loss to guess as to what happens next.
So an innocent intern in Washington, D.C. was gunned down by accident. Actually, it was gang violence and a stray bullet killed this person. And Trump used that as an opportunity to clean up D.C.'s crime. According to MSNBC, that's a terrifying prospect, the idea that Trump would actually try to clean up crime in major crime-ridden cities. And then it only got worse. MSNBC then said that the real victims in this whole situation are Democrats. Because as we all know, Trump supporters are the actual violent threat in this country, and Democrats should be afraid of them since they are now angry about Charlie Kirk being assassinated. Yes, that is their actual logic.
People are really upset, and they start lashing out online, and they start blaming others for what led up to this. I mean, we see it when Democrats are targeted. We see it when Republicans are targeted. And we're seeing it with this. Anna Paulina Luna, who's a representative from Florida, has put this out on X. She's blaming the Democrats. She's blaming the rhetoric the Democrats use calling Republicans fascists. She's saying, you are the hate. If you're in the FBI field office and you see this sort of stuff bubbling up online, how worried do you get about somebody taking up the cause of Charlie Kirk and lashing out on somebody who's seen as a Democrat or somebody who is a Democrat?
So people have no right to be upset about this, and actually the Democrats are the real victims because now they're going to be fearing for their lives. This lady should win the gold medal in mental gymnastics. Katie Tur also openly says that Democrats have been calling Trump a fascist for a decade, and then she fails to see how that rhetoric could be linked to attempts at violence, to attempts on people's lives, to assassination attempts, in other words. These people have partisan blinders so thick they are unable to see that calling Trump literally Hitler is a call to violence against him, and that in the past week calling Charlie Kirk literally a white supremacist is a call to violence against him. But don't worry, Democrats are the real victims today. Remember January 6th?
This follows innumerable other recent acts of violence, the assassination attempts against the president, the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. It follows the murder of state legislators in Minnesota. It follows the attack on Paul Pelosi in his home. It follows the murder of a healthcare CEO outside of an office building. One after another, these acts of political violence are creating very dangerous conditions with a tit for tat or copycat killings, or just the tragic descent into political violence.
I thought we have to settle our political differences by imprisoning our political opponents and setting them up in a fraudulent hoax. But that's just me.
I don't know whether it's political violence because I don't know who did it. I know they seem to have somebody in custody. But I will say that political violence, unfortunately, has been ratcheting up in this country. We saw the shootings, the killings in Minnesota. We've seen other political violence occur in other states. And I would just say it's got to stop. And I think there are people who are fomenting it in this country. I think the president's rhetoric often foments it. We've seen the January 6th rioters who clearly, have tripped a new era of political violence.
Yeah, January 6th. Yeah, Ashley Babbitt, who was murdered by a police officer, she's responsible for Charlie Kirk being murdered. That makes sense. But they also keep bringing up this Minnesota story. Remember the shooter in the Minnesota story? It was 2 local legislators in Minnesota, state legislators. The shooter had anti-Trump signs in his car, but there was some indication that he was also some kind of a fundamentalist Christian of some sort. We don't actually have a lot of info on this guy, but it's interesting that the Democrats today are all repeating this line about the Minnesota shooter as if this is a completely symmetrical issue on both sides of the aisle. And it's an extra special bit of irony that Charlie Kirk was gunned down while trying to have an open dialogue with liberals. That's something he did a lot at Turning Point. Sadly, this old video I dug up is remarkably prescient about what happened today.
I go around universities and have challenging conversations, and because that's what is so important to our country, is to find our disagreements respectfully, because when people stop talking, that's when violence happens.
I've never seen someone do this.
Well, it's a growing trend because people like me are facing violence, assault, the left. Yes, the campus Antifa. I've been stormed out of restaurants. I've been assaulted publicly, multiple death threats.
Okay, so what's your goal in all this?
There's more people that agree with me than some people would actually believe, and they come out of the woodwork when I do stuff like this. We record all of it so that we put it on the internet so people can see these ideas collide. When people stop talking, that's when you get violence. That's when civil war happens, because you start to think the other side is so evil and they lose their humanity.
Hopefully we see justice soon for Charlie Kirk. I have to admit, it hasn't really dawned on me that he's gone. He was such a pivotal figure in American politics. Hopefully we see justice soon for Charlie Kirk and for his family, and may God rest his soul.